what I realized quickly is if you understand the business and you understand why you get the movies and TV shows that you get.
Good day, Ben Fritz, who covers the entertainment industry for the Wall Street Journal. Ben, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
I am so happy that you're here. You have done so many amazing things over the past few months. I think your latest article, the $50 movie ticket, has arrived, has gone viral. You did a story on MUBI. You're knocking things out of the park. You also did a great podcast a couple years ago called With Great Power, The Rise of Superhero Cinema. And in that first episode, you talk about how whether you love Marvel films or whether you think it's the end of the film industry, that you should listen to it. It's a must listen. Considering I don't have very many people on the podcast who've done both, who both write about and do on this side of the mic as well as answer questions. You've been on a lot of different entertainment podcasts. Let's start with, is there a part of this that you love doing more than the other? Or is it just the way you should think about it, is just different muscles?
Yeah, I think of it as different muscles. I really think of my job as being a reporter, not so much a writer or a speaker. And which means it's about finding information, getting people to talk to me, hopefully revealing stuff that the audience doesn't know or telling the full story in a way that they haven't heard or read before. Now, traditionally, that was all about writing. That's what newspaper journalism was for most of my career. But more recently, obviously, it's become more multimedia. And I love podcasts. And when there was an opportunity to turn this story into a podcast, I thought this would be a better way to tell it, that history of superhero cinema story. So I'm open to everything. The main thing is I want to get to investigate stuff that I think is interesting and hopefully audiences will.
Yeah. And I think a really important part of what you're doing is that you're doing it in a way that's not confrontational. You interviewed the MUBI CEO, and normally CEOs aren't going to come on to talk about an article with, say, hey, this guy lost a ton of money. So it has to be about your sort of talent of being fair to people that I think really distinguishes your journalism.
Thank you. Yeah, part of it is being fair. I try to make clear to people, I'm not going to pull any punches, but I'm also not here to try to get a gotcha moment. I'm not here to try to trash anybody. I'm trying and I think people also realize the most important thing in doing that is I do a lot of my own reporting before the interview, and they know the story's going to happen with or without them.
That's awesome. So, Ben, I thought this would be as we approach festival season, a great time to talk with you about the state of the industry. So, film festivals, you have Cannes, Venice, Toronto, all coming up during the summer. I feel like the parallel for me is like the higher education system. Like the more that like these festivals or like the Harvard or Yale show success, the more interest there is. And it's just compounding where like the application for Cannes and Venice and all that is just growing so much. But are we seeing like increased sales? What is the state of the festival market as we go into the summer season and people start looking at buying films?
I feel like it's becoming a lot like everything in the American economy, which is it's a have and have-nots world, where there used to be the case that most movies that got decent buzz at Sundance or at Cannes got bought by someone and would end up somewhere, even if it's just a token theatrical release. But increasingly, as I'd say, the specialty box office has become really challenged. It was really hard to get people out of their living rooms and into theaters. It was already true pre-pandemic, and now it's way more true post-pandemic. So what at the festivals is a few big movies that seem to have real clear commercial appeal, like at Sundance, the Olivia Wilde movie. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name. That got bought by A24 for a lot of money. So you are still seeing some really big deals, but the quantity of deals, the number of movies that are getting bought, particularly for theatrical release, is down a lot.
Yeah. And you see that in US, Europe, it's really across the board. There's no specific like changes.
I mean, I'm not as much of an expert on what's going on in the film market in France per se, let's say. If you're a movie playing at an American film festival, you very much want to get American distribution, obviously.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you've had quite an interesting ride over the past few years. You went from AI filmmaking to covering AI, back to filmmaking. And in your podcast, you talk a little bit about comic books being part of it. But how did you know you wanted to get involved in filmmaking specifically?
I became an entertainment industry journalist. I'll say that I first got interested in the business. I always loved movies and TV. I
Yeah.
always loved entertainment. My mother's a theater actress,
Ooh.
but she loved, I think she probably always hoped she could have made it into film and TV too. So she exposed me to all that very much. And I, for whatever reason, I really loved movies and TV growing up. And I love going. I watched a ton of stuff. I subscribed to Premiere Magazine and Entertainment Weekly as a kid and ate it up every week. And I remember the for whatever weird reason, the public library in the small town that I grew up in had a subscription to Variety. I have no idea why they
Ooh.
had that. And one time I was probably like 16 or something. I found it and I read it and I was like
Oh,
riveted. I was because I
wow.
I think I just did not never understood before then that there was really a business behind this, and what I realized quickly is if you understand the business and you understand why you get the movies and TV shows that you get,
Yeah.
right? And that to me was very interesting. I always been like a problem solver, like a
Right.
puzzle solver, like I'm trying to figure out why things are the way they are. So that really
Mm.
appealed to me. And then the sort of follow-up was I wanted near the end of college, I was like, I should try an internship in Hollywood and see what if there's something I could do in the industry that'll be interesting. And I was able to land an internship at Variety. And
Wow.
I thought that would be a good place to be exposed to a lot of different things in the industry, but I quickly realized when I saw the reporters there and what they did, I was like, "Oh, this is what I wanna do." Like, this just it suits me really well. I'm in the industry, but I don't have to deal with studio politics or anything. I'm
Right.
more like I'm covering it, and I get to use my own voice and I get to follow the things I find interesting.
But there's no real interest in making your own film? Are we gonna see a Ben Fritz
No.
rom-com out there
No,
sometime?
no, definitely not, definitely not. I've done, like, a tiny bit of creative writing online over the
Okay.
years, but I it's not something you have to really wanna do that to succeed. I
Yeah.
obviously see that covering the business, and that's not something that I have a passion for. It's not something that I think I'm incredibly talented at, and since I cover the business and I know lots of people professionally and also
Right.
personally living in LA, I know what it takes to succeed
Yeah.
as a creative in the film business, and that's just not doesn't suit me, doesn't suit my personality at all. I think the job that I have suits me really well. Yeah.
So that job is now back to entertainment
Mhm,
reporting, but you did a stint as an AI editor
mhm.
working covering the West Coast and covering AI. Did you move to that specifically with the lens of, "Okay, this is an up and coming trend in filmmaking, so let me understand it," or was it just, "This is totally new territory, let me take a shot at doing something a little different?"
It was the latter. It was so
Okay.
I started my, so we call it, intermission from covering Hollywood in 2018. It was right after this book that I wrote came out, and I was feeling a little burned out. I had been covering Hollywood for 14 years at 3 different
Wow.
papers at that point, and I kind of felt like I'd said everything I had to say about the entertainment industry at that time in the book, and I was just a little bit less motivated than I had been. And this job came up to edit national news on the West Coast for the Journal, and I thought that would be really interesting, try something new. And I applied
Right.
and I got it, and I really liked it. And I did that for 5 years. And then there was a restructuring in that division, and I needed to find a new job, and the AI editor position was open. And I was like, that's incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
Like AI was is like the newest, arguably most important industry in the world at that point.
Right.
So I hopped on and got that job, and I did that for a year. And then, long story short, there was another restructuring, and I, as happens in newspapers, sadly. And
Right.
then I ended up, they offered for me to come back to covering the entertainment industry. And I was like, you know what? I've been off for 6.5 years at that point. The industry's
Yeah.
changed a ton.
Right.
I got to have the experience of editing, which I really liked, but part of me missed reporting. And so I decided I would do it and come back. And so far, it's been a year. I've been really glad that I did it.
And it seems in hindsight that the AI part of it now is so brilliant that you understand a lot of what companies are doing. So,
Mm.
what are your thoughts on where Hollywood is going with that? You look at OpenAI Sora closed. You feel
Mhm,
like the company Ben Affleck sold to Netflix was just as this tool. And it
mhm,
feels like there's this consensus that if it's this tool like CGI or whatever, and it's not replacing actors and films, it's okay. But you
yeah.
turn on any sort of like ESPN or whatever, you're seeing like clearly AI ads coming.
Mhm,
So
yeah.
do you think is that consensus going to stay that like as long as it's a tool, it's okay, or do you just see the wave crushing all of us of AI podcast hosts, whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that it is going to be it's a more and more powerful tool. And I don't think it's gonna replace creators. I don't think you're
Yeah.
gonna see, like, an AI movie or TV show or of any quality that people really want that isn't guided by a human. But I think what people
Right.
need to understand is that there are a lot of jobs in this industry that are not being the writer director, right?
Yeah.
There's like, or
Right.
the lead
Exactly.
actor. There's tons of people who are the middle class of this business. And what you definitely could see in the coming years is a movie that takes, let's say, would have employed 300 people. Now maybe it only employs 150 people,
Yeah.
right? Because each person has become way more productive and efficient with these AI tools. Maybe you don't need as many VFX artists. Maybe you don't need as many editors. Maybe you only need one sound person instead of four, et cetera, et cetera. So on the one hand, for the middle class of the business, that's scary,
Yeah.
and
Of course.
it will be really disruptive. I think that's true. On the other hand, you could see a lot more interesting stuff getting made because it takes fewer people to make a movie that today might cost $20 million to make. Maybe you can make it for $10 million or $5 million, which all of a
Right.
sudden makes all these movies economical in a way that they're not now. So
Mm.
you could see more movies getting made, more original movies getting made, more people who don't have access to Disney and Netflix being able to raise a little bit of money and make an interesting movie on their own.
Right.
So we could see this blossoming of creativity that maybe would rival what we saw in the 1970s. That's the best case scenario, I would
Right.
say. But
Yeah.
it's definitely going to be a lot of disruption. It's a really tough time to work in the business as, say, a 40 or 50-year-old who's had steady work
Yeah,
behind the scenes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really smart. So, most recent article with a fantastic whoever's writing the
Mhm.
headlines for your articles, is really doing well by you. The 50 movie dollar ticket has arrived, highlighting selling tickets for Dune Part 3, $50.
Mm,
So, this is a really interesting time in theaters. You have Dune Part 3, Odyssey, all these IMAX 70 millimeters selling out sometimes a year in advance.
yeah.
How like and your article discussed it like we talked about, you're not offering value judgments in the article, you're just reporting, "Hey, this is happening." Do you see that theaters trying to match that? There really isn't a great IMAX competitor. There's a ton to try. You can
Mhm.
say Dolby, whatever. There's a ton of different ones of initials and letters put together trying to get there. But what do you see as the future of theatrical? Is it that $50 ticket? Is it offering something to get people off the couch that actually moves them to it?
It's I think it's trying to slice and dice up the market. That's really was my takeaway from reporting
Mm,
that article is the
yeah.
same way that, on an airplane, if you're willing to sit,
Right.
if you're willing to, at this point, if you just want to get there and you don't even want to choose your seat ahead of time and you don't want to check a bag or anything, it's affordable, right? But
Right,
if you want to have leg room and choose your seat and you want to have
right.
food, want to check your bags, it starts the prices rack up, right?
Yeah,
So that's what they're doing for movies. It's if you're willing and able to see them like a matinee on a Tuesday and you don't want to buy any popcorn, like it's really cheap. But
yeah.
if you want to see Dune on opening night in the best theater, like they want to get as much money out of you as possible. And
Mm,
that's where the business is going. And theaters would say, look, it's like attendance is down a lot since pre-pandemic
right.
and we need to make every dollar we can. But
Yeah.
the danger, which some people in Hollywood think, is the more movies become a premium experience where you spend a lot of money, the more it becomes something people think of as, "I only do this 2 or 3 times a year," right?
Right.
Like a special night out, like going to the theater, as opposed to a cheap date, something just
Yeah.
felt like you just do, "What are we gonna do tonight? I guess I'll go to the movies." That's the way it used to be, obviously, and that's what I think the industry wants. Otherwise, if people only go to the movies 2 or 3 times a year, we're not gonna have very many movies.
No, exactly. And for an independent film director, is it just all overwhelming? You think about, like, all the Dune 3 like, you have the backing of a major studio to
Yeah.
get throughout the country, IMAX cameras, all
Mhm,
that. But if
mhm,
you've made a film, barring a red camera, just
yeah.
extending yourself out tremendously, and then you have to look at the hurdle of, "How do I get it in theaters?" Is it all just, "I'm gonna find the cheapest streamer that'll take it and just do it that way?"
There's But it's really up in the air right now. Yeah, I think the I'm gonna get a specialty label or specialty company to buy it and put it in theaters is it's like winning the lottery at this point. There's
Right.
a literal handful every year, and even the, like, focus features of the world and the neons of the world are increasingly their business is largely built around, like, horror movies that they make. That's really where they make most of their money, and they're literally just putting out a few, "Oh, we saw this cool movie at this festival, and we hope it grosses $10 million." Like, it's a real handful of films,
Right.
unfortunately, now. So, otherwise, yeah, like, you're way more likely to just be like, "Okay, this is going on." If you're lucky, Netflix buys it, but really, you're probably just going on
Yeah, exactly.
you're probably just going on VOD, and
Right.
you'll get a cut of the rental revenue, and then you can put them on, like, these ad-supported streaming services like Tubi and the Roku channel, and they will pay you based on performance, like a percentage of the ad revenue based on how much it's watched. So, but all the risk is on you. All that said, like, I'll say the one promising thing in this world of indie film theatrical I've seen recently is you've seen some YouTubers put movies into theaters and
Right.
find a niche audience. And the lesson there is not just you got to be an influencer. I think the lesson is if you have if you know who your audience is and you can market to them on your own, you know how to reach them, then theaters are willing to book your movies. Absolutely. If theaters are confident that, like, if you can demonstrate to them, like, look, I have this audience, I have this mailing list, I have this YouTube channel, whatever, and people are interested, and I'm going to market it directly to them. I'm not going to have to buy billboards and TV ads. Then theaters will be like, okay, we'll play it one night and
Right.
or a few weeks. And there are examples of that. And I think there are people, I know I've spoken to people who are trying to facilitate that and make it easier for people to self distribute their movies, which on the one hand, there's more risk. You're not getting a big minimum guarantee from a studio. But on the other hand, you can get into theaters. And if you're savvy, you can get people out to see it.
So the lesson here, whether it's AI or indie film, is
Mhm.
that it may not be just completely hopeless. So trying to have somebody listening to, we're not
Absolutely.
saying it's completely hopeless, but things are changing and you
Mhm.
need to be nimble enough to move where the market is moving.
Yes, absolutely. And you need to be way more entrepreneurial.
Yeah. So MUBI. I love MUBI. We did a Secret Santa for Christmas, and I gave my sister-in-law a 6-month subscription to
Mhm.
MUBI. I
Yeah,
let me say from the front, I absolutely love MUBI. But you and Kate Clark did this phenomenal article, like we talked about, how VC money and Israel outrage derailed a hot Hollywood startup. Can you talk about that article? What went into making it? And then what does that portend for the industry?
what went into that? It was a lot of reporting. It took months of reporting before that
Yeah.
came out. Not wasn't the only thing I did in those months, but and basically, like I said, I pursue things I find interesting and hopefully turn them into a story that will appeal to our readers. And I've used MUBI before. I'm very aware of it as a business, and I
Right.
was paying half attention. I'll say not fully to
Okay.
the social media firestorm last year involving their
Sequoia.
Sequoia. Do you need me to explain that, or do you think your listeners
Well,
know what
I
that?
think it helps. Yeah,
Okay.
this idea that Sequoia,
Mhm.
a lot of left wing,
Yeah.
I would say on average left wing media,
Mm.
film advocates
Mhm.
attacked MUBI for taking investment from Sequoia because it's related to Israel strike, and
Exactly.
it hurt MUBI quite a bit.
MUBI took this huge $100 million investment from Sequoia. Sequoia has put money into defense tech companies that work with the Israeli military,
Yeah,
and obviously the indie film community, the people who are the most avid users and fans of MUBI, the filmmakers, and a lot of MUBI employees are left wing people for the most part, and they thought that MUBI was like betraying its values
yeah,
by enabling genocide, essentially by taking money that from a company that makes profits from genocide. And it was this huge online firestorm last year. And I paid half attention, but MUBI's a pretty small company. We don't cover it very much. But as time went on, I realized this wasn't going away, and MUBI was having a lot of business problems. I was hearing rumblings they'd lost a lot of subscribers. Also, they spent a ton of money in that movie Die My Love, which was a massive bomb. And then I will just say I was able to connect to a source who was just close to MUBI, who was able to give me a lot of inside information on really what happened. And once I got that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is like a juicy business story." And the Wall Street Journal wants juicy business stories.
right.
And even obviously not like 99% of my readers are not like you. They don't watch MUBI. They haven't heard of MUBI. But so how do you make MUBI interesting? What if you connect MUBI to Sequoia, one of the biggest, best known VC firms in Silicon Valley, and you connect it to the debate over Israel and Gaza, which is obviously one of the hottest political issues in the world. And you're like, these things are all combining together in this indie film company. And I was like, that's actually a really juicy story that will appeal to a huge number of people, I believed. And yeah, then I spent a lot of time tracking down more sources close to MUBI, people who are without being too specific, I'll just say people who know what's going on there. I spoke to a lot of them, and then and my colleague Kate covers the world of VC and
Right.
tech well, so she knows people close to Sequoia.
That's
And
amazing.
and then we felt like we had the goods, and then we went to MUBI, and I said, "Look, I'd love to interview FA, but I'm gonna do the story with or without him."
And they decide to participate, which I think
Yes.
makes it I think is always smart, right? You should always want to get your point across.
Mhm,
Declining comment on any sort of controversy just seems, I don't know, missed opportunity. But it's a fantastic article. What do you think it portends for the industry? So there are companies like Mubi out there
mhm,
that trying to do this sort of like streaming of areas. You could go down the line of whether it's British cinema or Criterion Channel, whatever, trying to get like streaming audiences under some niche. Do you think that business model is just there's a flaw in it, like there's just not enough interest? Or do you think that one of these will emerge as like actually making money?
No, I think there actually is a business here. MUBI is a solid business. That's why Sequoia invested in them. It is a healthy business. They just made this huge mistake last year. It's you can debate, was taking the money from Sequoia a mistake?
Yeah.
MUBI, but FA, Caccarel, MUBI CEO, he would admit that the way they handled the outrage about it was flawed, to say the least. And that went really badly, and that damaged their business. And then also that they used some of Sequoia's money on to spend a lot of money on some big movies, sorry,
I know, it's a little
that
too
right,
close.
always too close. That didn't pay off and was really a mistake. And Dime I Love was the most prominent example. They spent $24 million in that movie. It grossed less, like about 10. So Mubi made some big mistakes, but the fundamental idea of we will have a niche subscription service for people who are passionate indie film lovers. As long as you keep the amount that you spend on content in check, it's a totally healthy business. And
Yeah.
Mubi was doing really well, especially during the pandemic when people were at home and needed stuff to watch. Mubi was growing at a
Right.
very healthy clip. So I think there is a business here. You just have to be smart about how you run it. And Mubi had a terrible year last year.
Without I mean, it's a lot to ask you this, but you've had a lot of experience covering Marvel,
Mm,
Mubi, or you think about the A24s and Neons. How do you and this is a $1,000,000 question,
mm,
but how do you make smarter decisions about where to spend capital? What in your mind does when it works well, like the
mm,
A24 Neon model, what are they doing differently that some others, like you can go down the list of production companies that start up?
mhm,
Roque was another one recently on
yeah.
Variety where lists are losing a lot of money.
Mm.
It's such a hard, yes, there may be a business model there, but it's such a high wire act to actually make money on it. What are your thoughts on like where people are really successful and how they're able to do it?
If you look at the companies that have succeeded, I can think of two things they've done well. One is they've really invested. It's not just well, get some good movies and everything works out. Like A24, and
Right.
to a lesser extent, Neon, and certainly also Criterion and Mubi to some extent have built brands that are meaningful to their audiences. Right? A24 is I think the most prominent example.
Right.
A lot of people, even if they're not big indie movie fans, they know what A24 is, and they think of it as being associated with like cool, cutting edge, culturally relevant, more creatively risky than your Disneys and Warner Brothers type movies. You know,
Exactly.
my teenage son knows what A24 is, and that name means something to him. And people buy A24 merch. Like that
Yeah.
brand, they've really succeeded at making their brand worth something. So they're not just dependent on this movie works, this movie doesn't. Well, we'll take a big risk on that movie. And I think Neon has done that to a lesser extent. And I think Criterion and Mubi have done it with mo they're not so much of an, like, an edgy young brand as, say,
Right.
A24, but they're like a if you're a serious film lover, if you're a lover of art house films, foreign films, like, this is something that you should be part of, right?
Yeah.
And look at, like, the Criterion Closet, right? That's really
I love
effective
that. Yeah, they've
branding
done
it.
great with that.
Right,
Oh,
it's such a great branding exercise to be like, "This is what Criterion stands for, and I'm a Criterion type of person because if I were in the closet, this is what I would pick."
exactly.
That's one thing that they do, and, like, Roque has a lot of problems, and I wanna pick on them, but and they maybe didn't have much time, but they what does Roque mean? What is that brand? It's nothing, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
mean
right.
anything. And you could even some of the big studios that I think are been flailing for a while, like Paramount, as much as a classic studio is, it doesn't they just live or die by their slate of movies this year. And Disney, A20, they've gone beyond that in a really meaningful way. The other thing I'll say indie companies that are successful do is they have a core business that's more reliable than like your films you purchase at festivals, and that's usually genre films, right? Like
Right.
horror is not every horror movie works, but horror is way more reliable than like your indie drama is at the box office. When A24 and Neon and Focus, they every year they have a steady stream of like pretty low budget horror movies, and
Yeah.
most of them make at least a decent profit, and usually one or two
Right.
break out and make a big profit. And that gives them some reliability that like their business is not going to live or die on a few really risky films.
Well said. So, do you get the sense from talking with Kate and from
Mm.
others in specifically the VC world, is that this might scare people away from Hollywood, like the reaction to Sequoia being involved and then being in such a public sort of entertainment that VCs may shy away from entertainment? Because I feel like you don't have a lot of venture capital like the Silicon Valley, other than AI, which I think
Mm.
is a separate category
Yeah, yeah.
involved in theatrical type.
Oh, yeah. And
Uh,
it's a real rarity. This the Sequoia's investment in MUBI was shocking to a lot of people. This is so outside the box for what they normally do. And the only other prominent example of VC investment in entertainment is A24, which definitely
right.
has some VC investment in it. So, yeah, I think that's always, like, unusual and challenging, and, yeah, this is probably just gonna make it even more challenging because 'cause you're like, this is a really tough business where, you know, the the money you make, even if MUBI is, like, does everything right, like, they're never
Right.
gonna make like, the best case
That's
scenario for MUBI is, like, minuscule compared to the medium case scenario for OpenAI, right?
right.
So, people are like, "Is it really worth the headache?" Or already you're like, the you're probably not gonna make a ton of profit even in success, and then you have
Yeah.
to deal with all this political headache because it's such a politicized industry and it's so high profile, like, it just gets a lot of press coverage and media public attention on it, public scrutiny. So, yeah, I think a lot of investors are definitely gonna look at this situation with Sequoia and MUBI and be like, "Is this really worth the headache?" Probably not.
Love that, Ben. So, what's next for you? Is there another podcast out there? Do you see yourself branching out to some other part of the entertainment world at some point? Or is it just, like you said, continuing to grow sources, feel like you're able to do more well reported type articles?
That's primarily what I'm focused on is whether it's podcasts or articles or charts, graphics led articles, whatever it is,
Yeah.
trying to find the most interesting stuff in the world of entertainment. And that could be stuff with movies, that could be like YouTube creators, that could be like the podcasting
Yeah.
business, that could be anything, theme parks, anything in the world of entertainment. I'm trying to find what's interesting and tell dramatic stories about it. And I would love to do another like multi-part podcast series one
Hell
day.
yeah.
I would love to
You're
write.
great at it.
Thank you, Ben. And I would love to write another book one day, but there's nothing like that in terms of what's immediately on my plate. It's just doing what I'm doing at the journal and hopefully doing it well and doing reporting that is interesting to the world.
Do you feel like things have become so much more,
Mm.
for lack of a better word, democratized since 2018 since when you returned to the industry? I feel like there's so many more stories in, say, the studio system, but you have companies like MUBI and you're dealing with the Silicon Valley. Like when you came back to it, did it feel a little bit like refreshing in the sense of how expanded the world was of cinema and film and entertainment?
Oh yeah, when in the phase one of my career reporting on Hollywood, it was primarily about okay, you cover Disney, you cover Warner Brothers, oh, and maybe this new company Netflix, and that's it, right? But now it's okay. I have to have a sense of what's going on in the entire ecosystem of YouTube, which is like
Yeah. Oh my God.
massive, right? Or you could, if you really want to have a handle on that, you could have 50 people just covering that, right? I have to have a handle on what's going on there. The theme park business has become way more important than it was when I was last covering Hollywood. And the studios are all being consolidated and chopped up and rebought, and streaming has become their primary business. The tech giants are here in a much bigger way than they used to. When I left, Apple wasn't in entertainment yet, and Amazon was a smaller player than it is now. So, yes, absolutely. I agree. It's become broader. It's become way more democratized. There's a lot more stuff that's under the umbrella of what I cover and what I can cover. And I have to pay attention to a ton of things and then be very selective in, okay, what am I going to actually spend a lot of time on pursuing? Because there's so many different things I could cover that fall under the umbrella of entertainment these days.
That must make it exciting, though. So, Ben, I like to conclude the podcast by asking people, and normally it's a collaborative type of thing for filmmakers. They didn't just make it on their own. They made it through a wide variety of different people supporting their project. So you're out in LA. I'm sure you're meeting filmmakers all the time.
Mhm.
Is there a film out there or filmmaker that you wish more people knew about?
I was thinking about this because it's such a cool question. I'm going to give you two answers if that's okay. One's kind of self-interested, and one is my personal passion. I'm going to start with the self-interest. I'm going to start with the self-interested one, or it's in the family. But one of the great things about like living in LA and meeting people working the business is you get to know them and you get to know their work. And so my wife is a film and TV editor. And
Yes.
when we started dating, I remember she was telling me about some of her work, and she told me about this little indie movie she did that I had not heard of. And I watched it and I thought it was great. And honestly, watching it probably played a role in my falling for her because I just thought it's a very romantic movie and very well made and so creative. Anyway, it's called Pink Wall. It came out in 2019. It stars Tatiana Maslany, if you know her from Orphan Black, and Jay Duplass. And
Ooh,
it's 6 years of a relationship from beginning to end, but told non-chronologically, and which seems like it could be pretentious, but I think the way they do it and the way it's edited, in my biased opinion, like it actually connects you know how in a relationship, like the narrative isn't always chronological. Like something that happens in year three is really has to do with what happened in year one. And
yep.
then something in year six, you look back and you understand, oh, I didn't understand at the time, but what happened in year two is what led to this. And it goes back and forth in time in this really compelling way. I love the movie. I love my wife. Anyway, so I highly
Love that.
recommend it.
I
Highly
love that,
recommend it.
man.
It's called Pink Wall. I highly recommend it. The other movie I'll mention very tiny movie that I loved was I'm a big fan of Andrea Arnold, who has made movies like Fish Tank and American Honey. She made this documentary a few years ago, I think it was 2021, called Cow, and it is
Amazing.
it's literally just about, a couple of cows, primarily one, at a dairy farm, and it has virtually no dialogue. The only dialogue you hear is, like, the farmers when they're around the cows, and this obviously sounds so boring, but she somehow manages to make, like, a compelling story where I really felt like I got this subjective experience of what it is like to be a cow on a dairy farm, and you see, like, the pain of having a calf and seeing it be taken away, and of seeing the cows around you that are older eventually being taken to be slaughtered, and what it's like for them to be milked, and it was there's no way to describe it without it sounding boring, but it's the fact that it is riveting nonetheless blew me away, so I highly recommend Cow.
Those are fantastic answers, Ben. So, Ben Fritz, entertainment covers the entertainment industry for the Wall Street Journal. There's two recent articles that are must reads on the $50 movie ticket has arrived and how VC money in Israel outrage derailed a hot Hollywood studio about MUBI. It's just fantastic journalism. It's just really cool what you're doing, and it's just fair to all points of view, which I think is rare nowadays to read something that you're just like, wow, that's really fantastic journalism. This has been such a great conversation about how you see the studio system, independent film, and you've done a great podcast as well with Great Power, the rise of superhero cinema. Just fantastic, Ben. And I hope that you can come back sometime on the podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Sure, thank you for having me on. This was really great to talk to you, Ben.